Brother Taj, what made you decide to embrace this Hebrew culture, this way of life? Give us a little bit of your history, your past, what your path was like. What your path was like to all the way to this point of you doing Torah.
Gotcha. So I would say not it all started, but first and foremost, started with me going to church every Sunday with my grandmother. My grandparents, both from the South, one from Jacksonville, Florida. My grandfather from Jacksonville, Florida. My grandmother from North Carolina. My grandmother came up here probably around the time when she was, I want to say like maybe 11 or 12, and she started to attend a Baptist church. She was Baptist pretty much her whole life. Whole family was Baptist, so lo and behold, her grandson is going to be Baptist. My mom was kind of on her own spiritual journey at the time, and it was kind of tough for me because I was attending church with my grandmother and not with my mom. So it was interesting, and I didn't really understand that at that point in time. As I got older, I understood a little bit more. But as I was attending church, just as any young man, so around this time, I'm probably like 10, 11, just like, all these questions. Well, who are these people? What do these names mean? I don't understand this. Are they real? Are they, is this nonfiction? Like, how can I relate this to my life? Like, why does this matter to me? Why do I have to keep doing this? And I never really got straight answers. But out of respect for my grandmother, I continued to go every Sunday, and we just kept going. I can't remember the name of the Baptist church that I was going to at that time, but shortly after, when I got into middle school around 11 or 12, we started to attend a Presbyterian church in Bed-Stuy called Siloam Presbyterian. And around that time, as I started to get older, these questions, though they weren't answered, I figured it was time for me to start answering my own questions. Something in me always was combative against the Jesus story. I never really gravitated to it, and I think at first it was always because at that church, Jesus was this white man with long hair, long straight hair, not even, I guess, somewhat curly, whatever their depiction of wool is to them, with the blue eyes. And I was like, why do we even commemorate or even look towards this person as, somebody that is giving us salvation? Looking at this white Jesus that was put up in this predominantly black church, and us commemorating, this face, showing love to this face, worshiping this face, but not really understanding who the person was, and not really getting to understand the background of it, because I felt like at the time the church wasn't really presenting that much, and that's no disrespect or shade to any other churches. This church in particular, I think the pastor at the time wasn't well versed in it, and this is just my opinion. Is also no shade towards that brother as well, but there's always something underlying most times when it comes down to certain organizations, and that's just how it goes. But I started to question it. So around this time, I slowly started to, in my prayers, I slowly started to take Jesus' name out of my prayers, and it was more so in the Father's name, in the Father's name, in the Father's name, and the Father no longer for me became Jesus. And the hard thing that I had to deal with was telling my grandmother, I'm not going back to this church. So also to go further, well, now we're at this point, so I would say I'm about 14, 15, I actually went away to boarding school in Virginia, an Episcopalian church, which is even tough because now I have to attend chapel every day at the school, and I'm struggling with that. But I'm not really more so focused on the church aspect at that time. So one of the biggest problems I had with the church as well was we were never elevating as a people in that church. And I think that was also the problem I had with the Jesus story, because it felt as if we had salvation and we could just do whatever we wanted to do and live amongst all these lies that have been told to us by an oppressor, and continue going without making any strides for ourselves. And that's also granted for the fact that we don't know our history. So with us not knowing history, how could we even move forward? So then that was now my new journey to just figure out, well, who am I? Who is Tajh Asante Restrepo? My name is like wild from like all different places, and it was just like, dang, I don't even understand what this means. So going back to that, why I said I had a problem with the church is I felt like it wasn't elevating the people. I wanted to make sure now that I took the time to go back to my community. Every time I came back home from boarding school, and then once I left boarding school, I did a year in Philadelphia for college, but then I came back here. Growing up as a young man in Brooklyn was not easy. My friends were getting killed left and right. Some were becoming incarcerated. The thing that kind of sparked something in my brain, and this is honestly the most high, but is when my best friend was killed and then my other best friend was incarcerated at around the same time, between a year. I felt alone. And I didn't really know where to turn. And I felt like at this point in time, it wasn't a great place for me to just say, you know what, well, let me be as destructive. I wanted to try and build and help make sure that other young brothers coming up in Brooklyn, if they went through this experience, they can navigate through it and understand how to be a better person. So that's why I started to give back to the community. And unfortunately, everything that I was doing, and once again, this is no shade to any organization or church that are doing great work in the black community, because at the end of the day, I still, appreciate those who want to make sure and see those elevate and do better. But the churches that I was in, they weren't doing this. I had to find a place where I made sure that I was giving back to the same people that I grew up around, and these youngins that were coming up, just to make sure that, if they ever stepped through a similar situation, or a situation that was even worse than what I saw, that they can understand how to navigate through it. So then that became my journey, and then that was now my journey around, I want to say 1920, of just figuring out who I was. I want to say maybe around like 22 or 23 is when like Hidden Colors probably came out. And then I started watching, trying to understand where our people came from, understanding what was going to happen and how it was going to look for us in the 2000s, and what we were going to do at this point in time to try and break free from the chains. The more I kept studying and researching, I never found an end goal until 2017, where my brother in this, Courtney, he said, Tajh, go back into the Bible. But he was like, it's not just going to be the Bible this time. It's the Torah. Focus on the Old Testament. I actually started to read it, and as I read it, things started to make more sense to me. And that whole time, I was like, well, I was living this out. I just didn't have the foundation. And to me, that's what the Torah was. It was my foundation. It was those teachings and instructions that were instilled in me, just as it says in Jeremiah 31, it's written on our hearts. This was just innate. And I think this is what it kind of came full circle for me. And at 28 right now, this is where I'm at. And that was the connection that brought me close. And as some people say sometimes, it's like, well, I just did it because my spirit felt it, or it was just something about the energy. It was just something about the Torah that was like, this is it. And, a lot of people now ask me a lot of questions. I post a lot of stuff on my Instagram. I talk to people about a lot of things. I'm very adamant about a lot of things that I was kind of like wishy-washy or on the fence for at one point in time. And I just let them know, like, this is my faith. And, you know, the Most High has been with me this whole time, and I knew that. You know, I was doing great things and I was being a good man, but I think I was missing the righteous part. And that's where the Torah came in. And I started to understand that the issues I was having before was because I didn't have this foundation.
Very, very enlightening. So you said the main factor was that one of your best friends was murdered?
It was murdered in front of me.
In front of you?
Yeah, I witnessed it.
And the other one got incarcerated for
He was incarcerated, gun charge.
Gun charge. So,
and this was all within about a year. So 2010, my friend was killed, and then my other friend was incarcerated 2011. He's still incarcerated.
So, wow. How? Just explain to the people, if you will mind. Mm-hmm. How do you deal with the fact that you see, and I assume he was murdered by gun?
No, even worse. To me, this is worse. When a person can get that close to you and stab you and kill you, that's deep. He was stabbed in his jugular.
Wow. Do you care to mention his name?
Oh yeah, we mention his name all the time. It's always Kelvin. We call him Bugs. Bugs was his last name. And Bugs was a special brother. That was honestly the death of Bugs was the Most High bringing forth, if we ever think of angels or something. He was that angel that came down. He was that brother that grew up in the projects, had probably the toughest life, like in our eyes, in any of our eyes. You know, had to raise himself at 16. You know, was robbing, you know, at a young age just to feed himself. Not because it was something cool or something he thought was cool. And completely switched and turned over his life and became an EMT worker. And actually, if you look him up, he's like, I guess the beauty of it is when you read the newspaper article, it's like this was this EMT worker that was killed, EMT worker that was slain. And that's who he was. He was a person that was helpful, and he gave help. And you know, he was a humble dude that just wanted to make sure that everybody was okay. His death is what kind of triggers something in my brain. Because even though I was angry and upset and I questioned the Most High, as I said, how could something so terrible happen to this person?
Right.
He left so many different clues on this earth before he left. And he said, you know what, Tajh? There's certain things that I did in my life that I'm not happy about. And I never forget. He asked me this one question. He said, yo, you think I'm making it into heaven? I was like, wow. I was like, why you ask that? He's like, yo, I did some real crazy things in my life. I was like, but look how you switch your life around. I was like, look how you living your life right now. That was a testament to any and every brother that's growing up in a rough or a hard moment. Like, you can persevere through it all. And he may not have understand this truth that I'm in right now, or my truth. I call it the truth, but it's my truth compared to others. Right. But I think if he was here to this day, that understanding would have translated into this regardless. And I think his life, him being on this earth and him meeting me was for that exact reason, to help shape me to this man I am today.
That's a great perspective and a great insight on.
To anybody that knew him, you know, they loved him. He was not a person that you wanted to hate, and he always wanted to show that love, despite how hard his exterior had to be just to make sure he maintained. You know, growing up in Tompkins Projects is no joke. At one point they had probably like the highest murder rate in that part of the star.
Right.
So
I don't know why I kept thinking LG, but it's close enough.
Yeah, it's not
I
far.
kept thinking
It's not far.
LG.
LG, yeah. It's not far. Myrtle Ave. It's not far. It's all in the same vicinity. So, and yeah, I think that kind of just like said, hey, it's either I'm a build or destroy. And what's funny about that too is my dad was a 5%er at one point in his life growing up, and I went back and tried to understand that. And then it also translated into the Torah as well, the knowledge, the wisdom, and the understanding.